Hello. In this video, we're going to talk about the cost of trust and how it is changing over time. So, to begin with, let's define what is trust and why it is important, integral part of the global economy. There's one definition which goes as trust is a propensity of people in a society to cooperate to produce socially efficient outcomes and to avoid inefficient non-cooperation traps. This definition is quite accurate. However, trust is quite abstract um, problem or concept. So there might be many different definitions. But this one is important because it talks about cooperation. And from game theoretic perspective, in any non-cooperative game, in basically an open market in an economy, Nash equilibrium is achieved by a mutual defection of people who are playing this game. So basically, as long as there's no rules and no system that enforces trust in the open market, people would always resort to opportunistic behavior. And opportunistic behavior is defined as not really following the rules of the contract. So I can bargain some terms of the contract, but then if there's no enforcement, if there's no policing of that contract, I actually would be better off of not keeping my promise and keeping my word, but rather maybe breaking the contract, which can be direct behavior such as fraud behavior, or maybe changing the terms of contract over time, or using my leverage to negotiate and get a better deal for me. So trust is not something that arises naturally in the market. It has to be created. The problem of trust is very, it's just enormous. There was a study recently in 2018 by Davidson where they calculated the cost of trust in the US economy. And in their research, they came up with $3.5 trillion a year, which is 35% of all wages, total wages paid in the US annually. So that's a huge portion of the country's GDP. Every year, 35% of all the salaries goes into different forms of building and establishing trust. We can extrapolate the same number to the global scale, and we would end up with $29 trillion that globally the world has to pay to build trust in the economy. And without this trust, the economy wouldn't be efficient. It actually wouldn't work at all, because there would always be this huge risk of your counterparty not following the agreed terms. The trust can be established via a few methods. So the first method, which would be on the left, is altruistic behavior. You actually, opportunistic behavior is not 100% bound to happen. You can avoid it. You can have people who are altruistic in their nature, or you can have very close connection to them. But the problem is not about individual psychology. The problem is that you never know beforehand. So when you're making a deal, when you're entering any economic transaction, you need to be sure that the other party would can be trusted, and they can be altruistic. They can just promise something and keep their word. But because you don't know in advance, you need to still invest into establishing that trust. So you need those institutions. And then on the right, you have another solution, which is really the single and most widespread solution to solve the cost of trust problem, which is in some paper they define it as Leviathan, which is just set of institutions. We have judicial, legal system, we have law, we have police, we have different types of market intermediaries. All of them exist precisely for this single reason, to build trust in the economy. But then There's another solution that is slowly emerging, which is an institution of reputation. So reputation is part of existing marketplaces, existing intermediary system, maybe credit scoring systems, and so on. However, those systems are centralized, those are locked in, and the decentralized reputation is the single most important innovation and solution to this cost of trust problem. And I will try to show why it is important. So let's take a look at how this works today. Let's imagine a person on the left, and their goal is to get some service on the right. It is an economic transaction. And this can be buying goods, this can be getting a job, this can be maybe getting some service, hiring professional, getting any type of value from another party. And this economic transaction has inherent transaction costs in it. And transaction costs are defined as, by protocols, it is defined as cost of bargaining, policing the, collecting information, bargaining, policing the deal, enforcing the contract. And any transaction cost, any type of economic transaction always starts with these transaction costs that are used to establish trust between parties. And in our current system, what we have documents, we have bureaucracy, we have all these institutions that I mentioned. So legal system, it works based on some type of documentation, some type of credentials that you need to provide in order to prove your trustworthiness. So when you, for example, applying for a job, you need to provide your passport and also your medical, maybe insurance and diploma, and the fact that you are experienced in this topic, and your social media profiles like Facebook or LinkedIn, and maybe curriculum vitae. So all this type of data is ranged from something being issued by an authority to something that is self-reported. For example, resume is data that is 100% self-reported. I can write anything, and really all of the data has to be verified because there's nothing at stake for me. I can really lie in my resume at no cost. And passports are issued by the authority by countries. However, this does not mean there's no guarantee that there's any single document that is issued by the authority that cannot be forged or faked. You can get there is precedence of passports being forged, so this is not 100% guarantee ever. So this is Web 2 approach. The difference with Web 3 approach is that you get the same transaction, same person, same service they want to get. However, in between, instead of them collecting and then presenting information, and by the way, the also important point here is that all this data is usually stored on some proprietary centralized service, which me as an owner of this data, I don't really have access to. So my information is stored on government databases or on Facebook and LinkedIn servers or on some third-party websites. So me as an owner of the data, I don't actually have access, and I'm not even able to share, to control who gets to see my own information. GDPR tried to solve this problem. However, it is kind of solved on paper, but it's not solved in reality. In reality, whoever controls the encryption keys for the data really controls access to it. And it is not users right now. The concept of decentralized digital identity or reputation network takes the same picture and flips it horizontally, or just flips it 90 degrees. And the idea with digital identity is, or decentralized identity, is that me as a person, I control on-chain identities or some kind of digital identifier where I have a set of data that is issued by third parties. So that data can be issued by the same people as in previous example, but this the power of digital decentralized reputation is much larger. So I can have same government issued IDs or work experience from my colleagues or maybe notes from my doctor or some data from different websites and services that I interacted with, or even just my friends who give me um, who give me attestation for something that I'm doing. And those people also have their own reputation. So remember that we said that um, no data can be 100% trusted. In this situation, we're not trying to solve it. We're not trying to achieve 100% trust. However, we're trying to score it. So the idea how this system works is that you have atomic sets of data, atomic credentials, atomic attestations issued by all these different parties, but then you apply scoring model. And in order to actually avoid the problem that you can see in Black Mirror episodes where they have social credit score, social rating, or Chinese social rating system, or any type of centralized reputation system, is to create a marketplace where you have a competition of scoring models. So, for example, if I am a Python engineer and I'm looking for a job, I can get quite a lot of different data from GitHub, from my coworkers, from my previous employer, from the government, and so on. And then all this data is stored with my digital identity somewhere in the cloud on blockchain. But then employer, they can use specific scoring model to apply it to the data that I have, that I share with them, in order to provide accurate reputation score for my data, which would be more or less objective because it takes into account quite a lot of data. All of that data originates from different sources, and none of those sources is me. So all of the data is reported by third parties. It goes into scoring model that is one of the models in the open marketplace where you have multiple, and those models are competing. They're trying to provide the most accurate score to the employer in this case. And that gives more or less objective reputation system with much lower cost. And that is a general approach how you would apply decentralized reputation to solve bureaucracy problems. So instead of building those large centralized institutions, you build protocols and you build programmable algorithms. And those are much more efficient because the overhead cost is much lower. You don't need many people to support the system. It is open, it's a marketplace, there's a competition, unlike any governmental body, for example, where there's no competition. You can have only one Ministry of Healthcare or Ministry of Education. And this system is basically code. You don't need to pay a lot to people who maintain it. You just need to build it once and then improve it over time. So when we try to solve trust, we can also look at different specific markets where this is applicable. For example, if we take a look at money and finance, the problem with money, if we want to build a trustless money system, so imagine central bank system, it is actually quite expensive to maintain. So the problem is that you need a lot of people, you need a lot of capital, you need a lot of overhead, and you still have a lot of risk because of centralization of that system. And then 2008, Satoshi comes with the white paper, Bitcoin, and what he proposes is we replace centralized institution that is run by people with decentralized algorithm, which he calls blockchain proof of work, or Bitcoin. And this consensus algorithm is solving the trust problem of basically security of decentralized ledger of money and accounts that is stored on chain. And that specific innovation helps to solve trust in the area of monetary policy. Same innovation can be applied to solve it in the area of finance. But the benefit of identity and reputation system is that it is applicable across the board. So if you want to get to under-collateralized loans in DeFi, you need some kind of reputation. You need social capital. Otherwise, you cannot get loans. But if you have over collateralized loans as we have right now, it doesn't make sense, because why would I put more money to take less? It's not a loan, it's just a leverage. Another important example would be reputation when applied to markets. Let's imagine an example of Uber or any other platform for this matter. In all the existing platforms, the service is done outside the platform. So we have buyers and sellers, their service, buyers are getting service from the sellers outside of the platforms. A platform just acts as a matchmaking service and also guarantees the result of the deal. So most platforms actually rely on reputation. For example, Uber, they have reputation of drivers and passengers, and that's how they are able to do matchmaking. So they are taking care of verifying that drivers have driver license, their car is in good condition, they are polite, and so on. So if you take this same data and put it into some kind of decentralized reputation system, and Uber does not really have a full exclusive ownership of this data anymore. And that, by the way, would be quite easy to do, because Uber themselves, they don't do verification checks. They outsource it to third parties. So those third parties can just take the same data and put it in, not on Uber servers, but in some other system. But now what you've done, you basically created a protocol out of a platform. In the next video, we'll dive into more details about how Web3 works and what is the core difference in terms of business model and value capture, and more importantly, market disruption potential between pipeline businesses, platforms, and protocols. Thank you.